Hans Ray's Tales of Adventure is a visual podcast. It's brand new, and I'm gonna be recording over the next few months several of my over 40 adventure trips I've done over the years. I'm gonna read actually the stories that were written after these trips, and we're gonna show a lot of interesting and cool photos along with them. So keep in mind, these stories were written at the time when the trips were done, some of them maybe 20 years ago, and others are more current. And in this very first episode, we're gonna talk about the TransAngeles trip. That was an urban mountain bike adventure with Hans Ray, Missy Giove, and Timmy C. It was done in December of 2017. The story was written by myself and edited by my wife Carmen, and the photos were taken by Bill Freeman. The idea of this trip was to traverse one of the biggest cities in the world on bikes in 5 days, not only showing the incredible nature and mountains surrounding the city, but also its diverse neighborhoods, suburbs, and famous landmarks. When this city was founded, its full name was El Pueblo de Nuestra Señora Reina de Los Angeles sobre el Río Porciuncula. If your Spanish is rusty, like mine is, that translates to the town of Our Lady Queen of the Angels of the Porciuncula River, aka LA or Los Angeles. Southern California has been my home for more than 30 years. After traveling to over 70 countries and riding my bikes in many remote corners of this world, I thought it was time to explore my own hood. What better way to do so than with a couple of mountain biking rock stars? Missy Giove is one of the greatest legends the sport of mountain biking has ever seen. She had a huge influence on helping to shape mountain bike racing and the rockstar image it had in the 90s. Her attitude and racing style made her one of the most outstanding characters in biking. Her childlike enthusiasm and naivety can sometimes mask the deep thinking and intelligent person underneath. A motor mouse that can talk 100 words a minute, that reveals a personality as colorful as the tattoos that cover her body. This is a woman that is pretty fearless, addicted to speed and sometimes reckless, with no fear of broken bones. This might explain a little as to how she has ended up in some sticky situations in her life. Timmy C, Tim Commerford, has been a longtime friend of mine and is a hardcore mountain biker. He is the bassist of the band Rage Against the Machine, or Prophets of Rage, and Audioslave. He grew up around LA and has more passion and enthusiasm for bikes than many pro bikers I have met over the years. We set out on the top of Mount Wilson at 5,710 feet, just east of LA in the San Gabriel Mountains, and were heading west in the direction of Catalina Island in the Pacific Ocean. To negotiate the urban stage through the city, we decided to mix it up between regular mountain bikes and e-bikes. We had a support vehicle, courtesy of Stans, that made it easy for us to negotiate the urban jungle that is home to 12 million people and even more cars, 88 independent cities and nationals from 140 different countries. Less than 150 years ago, most of the city was wild nature, as some of the surrounding areas still look like today. Much of Hollywood used to be orange groves, until some of the biggest oil fields in the world were discovered and the movie industry moved to Tinseltown. During our 5 stages, a few more friends joined us from time to time, as well as photographer Bill Freeman and videographer Cedric Tassan from France. One of my all-time favorite rides has always been Chantry Flats near Mount Wilson. To ride there with Missy was special, especially since she had hardly been around the bike scene or actually on a bike in the past 10 to 15 years, since she had retired from downhill racing. The former world champ and World Cup winner still had the same go-for-it style and attitude on or off the bike. As she doesn't even own her own bike at the moment, I was happy to supply her with some of mine during this trip. We had an incredible view from our starting point at the Mount Wilson Observatory across the entire city all the way to Catalina Island in the distance, where we would finish our traverse in a few days' time. Right behind us, to the east, looking over our shoulders, was not a single structure in sight as far as the eye could see, only nature. Beautiful forests, canyons, mountain ridges, rivers, waterfalls, and wildlife separate LA and the desert. It's easy to get lost in these mountains. The single trails are world class and often technical. Besides snakes and bears, we had to keep an eye out for poison oak plants. If allergic to them, as I am, touching its leaf will give a nasty rash that itches for days to the point of insanity. The trails can be technical and exposed, as sections like the 80-foot waterfall traverse can be fatal if a mistake is made. We spent the night in Pasadena, from where we started the next morning stage 2 on e-bikes, category 1, towards downtown. Missy and I were joined by Timmy C and Tony Santel, a friend of mine from Laguna who actually inspired the urban stages of this trip and has an incredible knowledge of all the neighborhoods, parks, river deltas, staircases and shortcuts. It took a lot of research to find all these unique routes, tucked away neighborhoods, unique buildings, and hidden sections of trail in between. Experiencing the contrasts of rich and poor, nature and urban development, history and culture. The e-bike was the perfect vehicle for this experience. Don't be mistaken. Just because we had some pedal assist didn't mean we didn't get a workout. We climbed over 4,000 feet that day, including some really steep Widowmaker climbs and staircases. Timmy launched a stair gap right at the beginning of our ride at the City Hall in Pasadena. Not a place to crash for a guy who makes his living playing his guitar. But no worries, he pulled it off, and I was glad I didn't have to report to his bandmates, Tom Morello, Be Real or Chuck D, to name a few, that their tour would be cancelled. Timmy is a very experienced mountain biker. He's been riding for over 25 years. He takes his bike with him on tour when he travels with his bands. He has done the Leadville 100, Race Across America, and one year he clocked over 1 million vertical feet on Strava. What he really likes are the technical challenges, especially climbs. Certain sections he would try over and over again until he would succeed without putting his foot down. He has also developed a big interest in e-bikes over the past years. Just like myself, we don't feel like that e-bikes will replace regular mountain bikes. We think there is time and a place for both kind of bikes. The electric assist motor offers a lot of new and unique ways to experience riding and creates new options on old routes. E-bikes is not cheating, unless you race others with it. Sometimes, or something unique about them, e-bikes put smiles on the faces of its biggest critics once they actually try one. Thanks to GT Bicycles, Fox, Cliff, Stans and Shimano, we had enough bikes for our crew to keep up with us and document our ride on film and photo. And I have to say here, these photographers and filmmakers who join me on these trips are super fit guys, and they work so hard, and they not only have to write everything we write, but then they have to film it and document it, and they never get a break. So big respect to these guys. It was Missy's first experience on an e-bike. She loves any kind of two-wheeler, and it didn't take long for her to get loose on the GT E-Verb. Shortly after leaving the city limits of Pasadena, we dropped into the Arroyo Seco riverbed and crisscrossed several neighborhoods to Mount Washington, where we took a break and ate a burrito, with great views of the downtown silhouette ahead and Mount Wilson behind us. Right before we got close to the center of LA, we found a great trail high above the Interstate 5 freeway near Dodger Stadium. From Radio Hill, we dropped down to Chinatown, but first we had to traverse some sketchy homeless area. Some of their provisional shelters were made of cardboards or tarps, and others had tents. As dangerous as it can be, for some suburban folks on expensive bikes like us, it was more shocking and sad to see the amount of poverty in this glamorous city. Next to freeways, under bridges, in parks, and in some areas like Skid Row, entire city blocks have makeshift shelters and tents along the sidewalks. Many have their few possessions stashed in shopping carts, all in the shadow of modern skyscrapers that tower over the maze of streets. We saw many cool landmarks along the ride, like the Bruce Lee statue in Chinatown. We blitzed through the Bonaventure Hotel and World Trade Center. Couldn't resist the staircase in front of the Walt Disney Concert Hall or leaving some skid marks with our rear tires on Skid Row. A nasty crash reminded me that I wasn't 20 years old anymore and that I wasn't on my child's bike. Luckily, I could limp away with just pain and some bruises, but no broken bones. LA is also a culinary experience. One can find food, restaurants, markets from all over the world. Los Angeles as a city has an enormous economic impact on the entire world. The economy in this city is bigger than Saudi Arabia, Switzerland, and Sweden. Day 3 started at the Griffith Observatory with breathtaking views across the city. Once again, we were on e-bikes. Our goal was to finish this stage at the Santa Monica Pier. Of course, we had to ride by the famous Hollywood sign, assault the staircases of the infamous Hollywood Bowl, slalom around the 2,500 Hollywood stars on Hollywood Boulevard, right up to Mulholland and sample some dirt trails at the Franklin Canyon Park, and pop out amongst the mansions of the rich and famous in Beverly Hills. Wheelies on Rodeo Drive between Lamborghinis and Rolls-Royce. Eventually we pedaled all the way to the Baywatch, or shall I say Pacific Blue, beaches of Santa Monica. No better day than a weekend to witness the craziness along the famous beach promenade of Venice Beach and the Santa Monica Pier, with all its artists, musicians, travelers, athletes, dancers, and freaks of nature. Back on our normal bikes, we hit Timmy's home trails in the Santa Monica Mountains on Stage 4. We rode a long section of the Backbone Trail that traverses these mountains high above Malibu. From Yerba Buena, we pedaled all the way past Pepperdine University on pristine single tracks through remote backcountry, canyons, valleys, and along panoramic ridges, all up high above the ocean. It was extremely windy and the fire danger was very high, especially after there had been several big fires in the area in recent weeks. We were lucky we were even allowed on those trails during those dangerous times. Missy was riding one of my old Sensor bikes and I was sporting a GT Force while Timmy rode his Enduro all-mountain bike. We had some good laughs. It was a good day and a proper day on mountain bikes. This tour can be highly recommended. The last trail was a descent along a knife's edge ridge with the dark blue ocean getting closer with every turn. We had an early morning start from the marina where we met a friend with benefits who owns a beautiful yacht which we took across the waters to Catalina Island. Catalina Island is a 22 miles long, 95% is part of a nature conservancy and it's almost as pristine as it was 100 years ago. It offers an abundance of wildlife including foxes and bison, which were set out in the 60s when many Wild Western movies were shot on Catalina. There are 2 small towns on the island, on either side, a small airport, harbor, and hardly any cars. After a beautiful 1.5 hour boat trip on our luxury yacht, we anchored at the small settlement of 2 harbors. Along the way we got to see whales and hundreds of dolphins. Since Catalina is a nature preserve, it is only allowed to ride on fire roads and one needs to buy a biking permit. There are some big hills across the island and unfortunately no legal access to single trails. Therefore we brought our e-bikes. We came across some beautiful bays on the backside of the island with clear blue water. We passed some ranchers and a few other bikers who were first not happy to get passed by e-bikers, until they test rode my bike, which changed their conception and attitude instantly. Before we embarked on our final descent into the historic town of Avalon, on the other end of the island, we opted to add an extra loop high above the town on the Divide Road. Catalina was once owned by the Wrigley chewing gum family, who donated most of it to the Catalina Island Conservancy to protect these beautiful lands for the future. Avalon is a popular tourist destination. It has many hotels and restaurants and an old casino from the early 20th century. It feels like a different world, although it's only 25 miles off the coast of one of the biggest cities in the world. As a matter of fact, on a clear day, I can see the island from my bedroom at home. It was the perfect way and team to discover this metropolis and experience many off-the-beaten tracks, areas, trails, and hoods. That's all, folks. So this was the first episode of my visual podcast, Hans Ray's Tales of Adventure. If you like it, come back, listen to some of the other 40-some adventures I've done over the years. And a lot of the films from these trips can be found on my YouTube channel. So happy trails, and I hope to hear from you again and see you. And please subscribe to my channel. That's all, folks. Bye.